Hello everyone. Tonight, I'll be reading 3 new creepy stories that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. So sit back and relax, because tonight, we'll be diving headfirst into their experiences.
These are their stories.
Okay, before I get into the story, there's a few things I need to explain about my country, South Africa, for you to fully understand the story. In South Africa, it's normal to have high brick walls with electric gates, electric fences, alarms, etc. The crime here is hectic. It's also pretty normal to have big gardens. My family and I are big animal lovers, so at the time we had 6 dogs. 2 Shar-Peis, 2 German short hair pointers, and 2 Dachshunds. With that being said, our dogs roam freely in and out of the garden, as it's obviously enclosed. We usually leave the veranda door open during the day for them to do their thing. Another thing about South Africa, it's normal to have a live-in domestic worker, maid, and gardener. Like, the average family usually employs them. It's not only for wealthy people, which seems to be a thing in other countries. For the story, our DW is Ellie, and our gardener is Vince. So, this happened in 2007 when I was just 9 years old. My older brother, who was 10, and I had just gotten our first cell phones that day. My dad surprising us after work. You may think it's a bit young, but it was used for emergencies or to communicate with our parents. Anyways, it's an important piece of info for the story. We don't usually leave our veranda door open at night, due to security reasons, but I remember it being a hot summer night that night. So of course, this night of all nights, the veranda door was wide open and the dogs were doing their thing in the garden. My brother and I were in my parents' room setting up our new cell phones, all excited. Ellie's daughter Anne, who's like an older sister to us, 18 years old, was helping my brother and I. My dad was somewhere in the house and my mom was in the bath. I specifically remember Anne having a comment about how the dogs would not shut up and how annoying it was. That's when I noticed it too. Sure, they'd bark, but it was usually the Dachshunds that yapped, when the bigger dogs just chilled. Plus, it would only happen for a few minutes, then they'd get over it. Something was different that night, as even the bigger dogs were barking non-stop. My dad appeared in his room and mentioned to us that he too noticed the dog's incessant barking. He was going to check if everything was okay. No alarm bells went off in my head, and I don't believe my dad thought anything was amiss either, because my brother asked to investigate with them and my dad agreed. I was obviously too engrossed in my new Sony Ericsson. My dad ventured out to our garden with my brother in tow when my dad had noticed the dogs were all grouped, growling and going nuts at a dark corner behind our in-the-ground swimming pool. The best way I can describe it is that our garden beyond our pool hits like a slight decline, so we have a few steps leading down the hill to the bottom end of our garden. We usually have a lamp that lights it up, but my dad had noticed how the lamp seemed to be off, which confused him because he could have sworn it worked the other night. Either way, my dad said he got this gut-wrenching feeling because of this and because of how out of the character the dogs were acting. He called after them. They'd usually come running, but tonight they all just seemed to look at him, then turn back around and continue to go crazy at this dark corner down the steps. My dad told my brother to go back inside the house and get a torch, sort of using it as an excuse for my brother to not come out with him because of this off feeling. When my brother went back inside, my dad slowly approached the steps. He noticed how the dog seemed to be snapping at whatever it was, hiding just out in the view in the darkness. As he got to the steps, he noticed the lamp was smashed. Confused, he inched the steps, and as he put 2 and 2 together, it was too late. My dad, being an ex-vet and an avid hunter, felt something cold against his temple and immediately knew it was a gun. Out of the darkness stepped 4 of the men in balaclavas, all armed. Shocked, he stood frozen on the steps. The man holding the gun to his head was instantly aggressive and asked him where my brother was. That he saw my dad come out with my brother, but my brother went back into the house. My dad said something came over him, and before he knew what he was saying, he responded with, "He's gone inside to press the panic button." As he said it, he saw how all these guys started to panic. They started speaking in an African language called Zulu. Assuming my dad couldn't understand, it's not common for white people to speak it, but my dad had actually grown up on a farm where he learned it fluently because of the farm workers. The aggressive guy holding the gun said, in Zulu, "The cops will be here any minute. Let's just kill this, grab what we can, and go." The others seemed apprehensive, and a smaller guy seemed really on edge, and continued to say how he can't go back to jail again and they need to get the out of there before the cops show, which would be any minute. He was panicking. My dad then fed on this guy's fear. My dad then interrupted them, speaking English, pretending to not understand what they were saying, and said that we usually have armed response vehicles that drove in our area, and since my brother pushed the panic button so long ago, they'll probably be here any second. And that did it. My dad watched as their plan unraveled before them. The smaller scared guy started freaking out all the other guys, saying that they need to leave ASAP or else they'd get caught. He seemed to make the others more nervous and lose confidence until they started full-on bickering amongst themselves, their plan slowly turning to as a third guy had put it. The aggressive one pointing the gun to my dad's head slowly lowered it as they started fighting, losing focus on my dad and shifting his focus onto his crew. My dad then used this as an opportunity to slowly back up the steps and turn to dart to the house. As luck would have it, as my dad ran into the veranda door, my oblivious brother was heading out with a torch. My dad scooped him up under his arm mid-ran and sprinted into the house, not even closing the door behind him. Silly, I know, but I think he just wanted to get my brother inside as quick as possible without even thinking. Anne and I were obviously also oblivious to everything. When my dad rushed to the bedroom door, slammed it shut and told us to go upstairs into the attic, quote unquote, "There's 5 guys outside with guns. They're here to hurt us. Get upstairs now." My heart sank. I remember my body automatically responding and me sprinting to the stairs with Anne right behind. My mom ran out of the bathroom in a towel, not too far behind. We sat there in darkness and silence. I swore you could hear a pin drop. I think we were all just wanting to hear something below us in the rooms. My mom cursed saying she didn't have a phone, neither did my dad. But ha, in my hand was my brand new Sony Ericsson. No better emergency to use it than now, right? My mom dials the police and I kid you not, they asked where we live, we explained and they told us it wasn't in their jurisdiction. Sorry, click, the line goes dead. We're now not only ourselves, but we're flabbergasted too. My mom starts cursing like a sailor again and that's when my dad realizes. He didn't close the veranda door and what about Ellie and Vince, who are in their rooms, blissfully unaware of the danger they're in. He gets his firearm in the safe in the attic and tells us whatever we hear, do not come downstairs. To stay hidden no matter what. Now I'm sobbing, begging my dad to not leave us, but he tells us he has to go get Eli and Vince before something bad happens to them. Now there's even more tears, as reality hits that there's 2 other people still in danger. Anne's understandably in hysterics because she's also fearing for her mom downstairs. My dad disappears and the air is thick with tension. We can still hear the dogs going crazy, indicating that those men were still on our property. My mom then calls another number, the armed security that drives around the area, and they say they'll be over in about 10 to 15 minutes. They say to wait and stay hidden until they ring our bell at the gate. We all wait in silence, fearing that we'll hear a gunshot or anything indicating these men are in our house. But there was just silence. The only sound was the dog's barks outside. After what seemed like hours, most likely a couple minutes, we heard stomping coming up from the stairs and my heart rate quickened. I remember shutting my eyes and praying that it was just my dad with Ellie and Vince. Luckily, it was. We all hid for a while, no one dared to speak. The dog seemed to have calmed down considerably, but we were still barking every now and then. The gate intercom rang, and my dad told us to wait while he checked if it was just the security company, and sure enough, it was. He opened up and the nightmare was over. I remember standing up and my knees buckling from the adrenaline my body endured. The armed security somehow notified the right police, and everyone investigated the garden. They found that there was actually 7 pairs of footprints and that these guys bent the spikes on our wall and just climbed over. We got an electric fence shortly after, so there must have been 2 other guys hiding in the shadows that my dad had seen, which is actually creepy in its own right. Thank goodness nothing happened to my family, and I'm forever thankful for my dad's quick thinking regarding the panic button. Also, I'm so glad my dad understands Zulu and can manipulate the situation to benefit us. This takes place in the early 80s. I grew up in the suburbs in a very friendly townhouse complex. We all knew our neighbors. My first friends were the kids that lived in other townhouses. To describe my home, all townhomes are attached. They're also very tall and slender. I had 6 flights of stairs to go from the basement to the bedrooms on the top floor. We had a tiny driveway, and then there was the small roadway. On the other side was a raised flower bed that ran the length of the side of the townhouse wall across the street. The most important thing was a very bright street light in the middle of the planter. It shined ominously right into our front windows at night, and it had enough light to illuminate shapes above the kitchen counter on the 3rd floor kitchen, just the top part of bodies. You didn't need to turn on the kitchen lights at night if you needed to get something. One night I had a sleepover with my friend who lived diagonal to me. Us gals had stayed up late and went to the kitchen for snacks. I peered out into the street to see an unfamiliar guy walking by on the roadway. There was no sidewalks. I noted to my pal that there was a weirdo walking by because he didn't seem right. He was tall and lanky with long 80s hair. With our familiarity with people in the neighborhood, we didn't recognize him. Our complex roadway did lead to a street, but it wasn't used as a shortcut because it was a long way to get around the neighborhood, so you didn't see others often, especially at night. As soon as I commented weirdo, he walked by our house. Only a couple of minutes later, he walked by again, going in the direction he came on the roadway. This time, we saw him out of the corners of our eyes coming along. Being scared kids, we immediately ducked as we were visible to the street. Up until then, we didn't think anything more of it, but our instincts told us to hide, so we did. My friends said we were overreacting after a few minutes being crouched down, so we carefully peered over the counter. Weirdo hadn't walked by. He He was now standing in front of the flower planter looking up at our house. To this day, I remember that bright streetlight illuminating him from behind very ominously. He looked like a horror film killer come to life. We hit the floor again, thoroughly freaked out. I don't know how long we were there for. I could only hear the sound of our breathing for some time, until I thought I heard the squeak of the garage door handle. It was one of those old rusty ones that opened outward. I thought I was dreaming until I heard for the second time that rusty handle squeak. He was trying to get in now. My friend and I were frozen in fear. Luckily, my dad always locked the garage. The squeaking stopped. Even though my friend and I could have run upstairs or shut it to my parents, we were rooted on the spot, thinking if we moved, he'd get us somehow. We thought that was it, as it was suddenly quiet. But a few minutes later, I heard the swoosh of the screen door and telltale sound of the front door handle being pressed down. The first screen door was never locked, but thank God the wooden door always was. The noise repeated a few times. The metal scratching of the screen door hinge and the click of the front door latch. I wanted to piss my pants, and my friend looked like crying. Again, we were too silly enough to move or do anything to help ourselves. We just shook in terror and hoped he'd go away. He stopped trying to get in after about 5 minutes, and all we heard after that was silence. About 8 minutes later on the kitchen floor, we moved to stand up. I thought we were still pretty crouched down and invisible. That wasn't the case. This time we heard a clear voice. The other kitchen window near the pantry had its screen window open. "Hey, I'm thirsty. Can I get a glass of water?" My friend and I stared at each other in disbelief. He was still there. We didn't move, but someone had to eventually. My friend, being the braver one, decided to peek out the screen window while trying not to be seen. He must have heard her. "I know you're there. Come on and let me in. I won't hurt you." This was the moment we decided to flee up those 2 flights of stairs to my bedroom. I always had an active imagination like most kids. I really hated that my bedroom was the very first one at the top of my stairs. My parents were at the back. Therefore, in mind, I would be the first one to be murdered if someone broke in, and that fear was certainly tenfold that very night. My friend and I hunkered down on my bed, deep under the covers, shaking. We did not sleep at all, waiting for the click of a door or worse. We thought we heard him try again, but at that point we weren't sure if we were hearing things. Until the day I moved out, I never really felt totally comfortable in my bedroom ever again. I'm a 21-year-old female, and this story took place when I was around 11. I remember this day clearly because it was the first time I was ever allowed to walk to school and back by myself. Up until the age of 14, I lived in what we thought was a safe place in Chautauqua County, New York. Everyone knew everyone here. If you thought you would get away with something, then be prepared to have your ear chewed off by the time you get home. There was this one day though, it was a cold winter day and school unfortunately was still open, so all the neighborhood kids had to walk through knee-high inches of snow just to get to school. It took me longer to leave the house as I was used to walking with my older sister to school since she knew the routes better than me. I always used to make fun of her for being paranoid and taking a different route every day from school, but after that day, I learned that was what saved my life. As I was waiting by the door to leave, my mom came up to me and told me that I should ride with her to drop me off because my sister was too sick to go today. Being a brat, I made a big deal about walking by myself because I was almost 12 years old and all my friends' parents let them walk alone. She looked at me for a long while, then told me to make sure I pay attention to cars. I got hit by a car and almost died when I was 9, so the worry that showed on her face was well warranted. I hurriedly nodded and headed out the door to go to school. My sister didn't like to dilly-dally, so she was always in a rush to get to school early, but seeing as it was just me, I thought it would be a good idea to take my time. I would play in the brown slush that was on the left side of the road, and even made funny looking snowballs to see how far I could throw them. Halfway to school, I noticed a white van following behind me. Being the playful child I was, if I had not been bending down to make another snowball, I wouldn't have noticed it slowly creeping up the street. I told myself I was being stupid, but continued more hurriedly to school. Once I got to school, I took a quick glance over my shoulder and saw the van a few feet behind me. It wasn't until I was on school grounds that it drove away fast by me. I thought that would be the end of it, but throughout the day when I would stare out the window, the van would be there. I assumed that it never really left, just parked. Many adults would try to convince me years later that maybe it wasn't the same one, but I knew it was. The van had a bright yellow smile emoji sticker on it. I couldn't see who was in the van, but through the tinted glass, I knew they could see me. It was now the end of the day and I wasn't ready to go home. It was too late to call my mom, because she was at work and my sister was homesick. I had to suck it up and start walking home. I tried to blend in with the group of kids, but most of them were car riders, and the others didn't live near me. Remembering what my sister told me, I took another route home. I didn't memorize this route clearly, but I decided anything was better than being spotted by that van. I made it to my main street, but realized my mistake too late. The route I took led back to the main street where I walked to school. Hidden behind a row of cars was the white van with the smiley emoji sticker. I tried to stay calm and walk past in, but once I heard the van door slightly click open, I ran. I could hear the rush of 2 pairs of heavy footfalls behind me. They were getting closer, so I did what any normal kid would do. I cut corners. I cut into someone's backyard until I was directly inside of my house and forced myself into the thick snow to make it to the door. My heart was racing, not because I was running, but because I could still hear them behind me. I made it to the door and banged with all my might until someone came to the door. My sister looked confused, but one look at my face and she pulled me inside and locked the doors. The van was still outside. Truthfully, it stayed out there until my brother got home. Me and my sister don't talk about it, but we both knew how close it was to me going missing. Whoever you are that attempted to kidnap me and do God knows what else, let's not ever meet again. Alright, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I now have memberships enabled on my channel for $5 a month. If you wish to support me, you get priority reply to comments, members only chat rooms, and gameplay with me on Steam. So if you wish to support me, it's greatly appreciated. I will also be live streaming more, so stay tuned for those.
As always, have a nice day.